I'll start. You can talk well, so we're going to be good. Hi, everyone. Happy to introduce Philip Fitzsimmons. Do you want to start us off with an intro to you and your books?
Yeah, my book or my books. As you
Do
said,
your books because we're going to cover the series and
that's right. The
everything else.
series, and in fact, even the series is plural. I am, as you say, Philip Fitzsimmons, and as you know, I write taut psychological thrillers that tear back the veil of the drug culture in 1960s New York against a backdrop of. No, I'm just joking. Obviously, I am actually PJ Fitzsimmons, and I write funny, fuzzy, comfy, cozy mysteries in the vein of Agatha Christie. In fact, I pitch my books as Agatha Christie as written by P.G. Wodehouse. The main series that I'm here to talk about today is our anti-Beaujolais mysteries. Anti-Beaujolais mysteries are locked room mysteries. There are 2 locked room mysteries in every anti-Beaujolais book, and indeed, if your anti-Beaujolais mystery doesn't have a minimum of 2 locked room mysteries, please return it to your retailer for a full refund. There is also inevitably an animal of some description, because I'm very, very fond of that. I just sort of got trapped into including an eccentric animal, not a talking cat who helps solve crimes or anything of that nature, but a real animal. And a subsidiary impossible mystery. And so I've really tied myself. I've really manacled myself to a series that requires me to come up with 2 locked room mysteries, 2 convincing locked room mysteries, and a tertiary mystery that may or may not contribute to the resolution of the crime every single episode. Anti-Beaujolais mysteries is, as I say, they are pitched as sort of a Wodehouse world with a Marple murder rate, if you will. And it's something that's been with me for a very, very long time. I don't know if it's been with me since I first read my first Agatha Christie or since I read my first P.G. Wodehouse, but it's been about 30 odd years that Anti-Beaujolais has been forming as a character. 20 years since he had a name, and about 3 years since I finally sat down and decided that I was going to actually do this thing without any serious intention of anybody ever taking it, well, obviously not seriously, because it's not meant to be serious. Comedy is the cornerstone of these books. The route that I took, I think, is kind of interesting, so I'm just going to touch on it very, very quickly. I did not believe, I've always wanted to be a writer since I first knew what a writer was, but I never thought that I had the technical skills. And so in about 2012, when this became a viable thing to do, I proposed myself as a ghostwriter. And I didn't propose myself for anything that I didn't know I couldn't do. But I had to train myself in the technical and the scientific aspects of writing whatever it is I wound up writing. And I wrote everything from outlines to parodies to mobile phone application content to street signs to absolutely everything, and progressively learned the trade, read the books about the trade, read Stephen King's On Writing obviously several times, and read books that with a critical eye so that I would understand what it was that made one book good and another book less so. And did an astonishing number of outlines. I was very surprised to discover that once I had taught myself the mechanics of a 3-act structure, that I was being hired quite a bit to write outlines for other writers. And I don't know if that astonishes you, but it astonished me to discover that there are writers out there who can't come up with story ideas, so they're willing to pay somebody else to do it. I did a lot of that, did a lot of developmental editing as well. And then at about 2019, and yes, it is coincidental with COVID, like an awful lot of other writers who finally decided to sit down and do something with their lives. But it is just coincidental, because that was when I was ready to finally write Anti-Beaujolais as a story. But the route there was also punctuated by efforts to market for books that would be traditionally published. And I finally did one. After everything I'd learned, I sat down and did everything I thought absolutely scientifically right. And it got a record 99 rejections, I think. Some of them are still outstanding, but after 5 years, I think I could regard that as rejected. So just to get it into my system, I wrote Anti-Beaujolais. I didn't even try to get representation. I self-published it directly. And I was certain that it was not going to do anything, but at least it'd be out of my system and I could go back to writing serious literature. And people liked it. it was extremely gratifying. I call myself a writer, and I don't have words to express how gratified I was when people started to not just say nice things about my books, but to say exactly what I hoped they would say about them. They got what I was trying to do. Yes, he's taken these Agatha Christie plots, and he's taken this Woodhouse prose, and he's made a new niche pastiche, which kind of works. Not for everybody, absolutely not. And indeed, one of the initial challenges in bringing people to my books was making certain they understood this is meant to be funny. And so an awful lot of people, occasionally, especially when you're targeting the cozy mystery crowd, will open it up and see a guy talking about being defenestrated from in a telegram in the very first paragraph, and think this guy's clearly drunk, and I'm not going to enjoy this book. But those who knew what they were getting into, it seemed to work. Since then, that was 2019, December 2019. So it's been roughly 4 years since that started, and 2020, I beg your pardon. And that is the 9th book will be coming out shortly. The last one was Mystery and Malice aboard RMS Ballast, which has an impossible murder at sea. And it also has Teddy Quillfeather, who is Auntie's cousin. And she is another character who has been with me in one form or another for years and years and years. And I've always wanted to write her. And she's actually appeared in Auntie Bougela's mysteries on a number of occasions, but with different names, different characters. And then finally, I made a conscious decision that she would appear as Teddy Quillfeather in Mystery and Malice aboard RMS Ballast, where she helps Auntie solve an impossible murder at sea. And as a reward, she gets her own series. So I now have another series, starting with Hardy Hall at Hardy Hall. The first Hall is spelled H-U-L, and the second H-A-U-L, and the second one is spelled H-A-L-L. Hardy Hall at Hardy Hall is the first in the Teddy Quillfeather series of mysteries. Also, once again, Golden Age, 1920s. In this case, a fast-living, fast-thinking, fast-talking, fun-loving flapper, Teddy Quillfeather. And I think that brings us up to date. Did I go on too long? I tend to do that.
It's all right. We've got some hellos from Donna and Jane.
Hello, Donna and Jane.
Laura Hamilton says she's interested. She loves Agatha Christie and Woodhouse and needs a locked room mystery for one of her reading challenges.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. There's me. The best locked room mysteries that I've written are the last one that I've written every single time. It's Agatha Christie invented this amazing genre, and everyone has their own favorites. Evil Under the Sun happens to be my personal favorite. It's not a locked room mystery; it's a locked beach mystery, if you will. But I marvel at the challenge that she took on for herself. But then I've done it too. I've put myself in a position where I have to come up with 2 locked room mysteries every single book. And I like to think that I follow the strict rules that she herself laid down in the case of her stated objective in the Affair of Styles, for the series Affair of Styles, for example, that the reader has to be able to figure it out, but not easily, obviously. So the clues are there. How the locked room mystery was done and who did it are always there, and that's the Agatha Christie side of things. The ode to Woodhouse is the way it's written.
Yeah, she didn't invent the locked room mystery, though, did she, Agatha Christie?
No, I beg your pardon. When I say she invented a genre, I was actually conflating 2 thoughts there. And the genre to which I'm referring is the cozy mystery that we all write right now. And the Mysterious Affair at Styles, as a matter of fact, is one of the books that I found the most educational, because there may be people who haven't read it, so there's only so much I can say about that. But yes, you're absolutely right.
I haven't read it.
You have, or you have not?
I have not.
Then I'm not saying another word.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can say about the book that doesn't spoil the potential surprise.
Well, and we don't allow spoilers in our group, so
not
no spoilers.
Nope, absolutely not. And you shouldn't allow spoilers.
Donna has said, and I was going to ask this question as well. She said that names are as important as everything else, especially in cozy mysteries. How did you come up with yours? Because they're very unusual names. And do you think the sort of thing I was going to ask about that is, do you think that puts some readers off? I think some readers, if
Yes.
they can't pronounce a name, are a bit like, I don't
Yeah.
really.
In the case of Anti Beaujolais, I don't really know why I settled on that. I did want something unusual, and something counterintuitive in terms of pronunciation is not necessarily a bad thing. Deal and Pasco, for example, even Poirot, these words aren't names aren't immediately evident how they're pronounced. That's not problematic. I think that makes them a little more memorable. And I also enjoy the little Easter egg that it compels me to put in every single book. At the beginning of every single book, Anti Beaujolais has to teach somebody how to pronounce his name. And I do that for the reader. The books are standalone, and so I never assume that somebody reading the book for the first time has already read the previous book or in any other book in which the correct pronunciation of Anti Beaujolais' name is there. As for the other names, there are two things going on. One is sort of a personal hang up. Any name that I read in fiction that sounds like I could have got it out of the telephone book sounds fake to me, and that's my own ear. There needs to be something original about the name, and there also needs to be a rhythm to it. It needs to somehow. I have a bit of a metronome in my head, and that applies not just to names but to sentences and to place names and so on and so forth. And put titles, and I do need to be happy with the name. I spend a lot of time thinking about the names, often change them partway through, and then finally, of course, there's the P.G. Wodehouse aspect of it. P.G. Wodehouse has Bertie Wooster and Bingo Little and my mind's a blank, but of course everyone knows the newt fancier, and so on. And those names they're delightful. I think they're as much fun to say as they are to write, and they're memorable. And I think that's also helpful. It helps distinguish the characters as we're reading when we've got all the names. Although I confess, I've had a lot of feedback from people who say maybe Anti could occasionally call somebody by the same name more than twice in a row, because he does tend to use a lot of nicknames as well. Yes, I do think that sometimes it puts people off. A lot of the decisions that I make sometimes do put people off. A lot of the same decisions, though, I think draw an awful lot of other people in. The books aren't for everybody. They're funny. They're a bit irreverent. They're ironic, but they're also always nice. I hope that at least the people who do like the books appreciate how much more work it is to write nice humor than it is to write nasty humor.
The Donna said sorry for stealing my question, but it's fine, Donna. I'll forgive you. Because I was going to ask about the names. I did, yeah. There is a lot of this follows into the other thing I was going to talk to you about, because he uses a lot of kind of public school nicknames and things.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you about how hard it was writing in that style. So you've written it sort of very, I don't think I'm the correct word of saying it, but like that very old-fashioned, like almost P.G. Wodehouse style, haven't you? And that must be quite hard to get into that sort of, because that's not how you talk. So it must be quite hard to go into that frame of mind to write.
Yeah, it's not how I talk. Amusingly, when my wife first did my first beta read, my first alpha read, she said, Anti Beaujolais talks like you. And I said, no, he doesn't. She said, okay, he talks the way you wish you talked. And that actually is true. Yes, again, that was a deliberate decision. It's a decision to differentiate myself. But once again, Anti Beaujolais was never intended to be a huge commercial success. And I doubt he ever will be. He's meant to be a niche pastiche. The decision to write like P.G. Wodehouse, decision to write in this old-fashioned manner, and frankly a slightly elevated language as well. I don't shy away from using a word that might be a little bit archaic. Intermittently, I might employ a word that to my mind works better, not just because it means more precisely what it is that I want to say, but also works better in the rhythm. And it's closer to what I think Antti Bougele would have said, because he himself has a classical education. He reads Shakespeare, he reads romantic poetry. That's the way he's likely to talk. And of course, the books are in the first person. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's still avoidable as well. There's no rule that says I have to write exactly the same way somebody who had an education from 1912 to 1928 would talk. But I like doing it. And once again, the real objective to writing these books at all is to try to expand some of the eternal optimism that I personally drew from the P.G. Wodehouse books. I think he did a lot of good in the world, and I want to do some of that good too.
Donna says, "What's the coolest unusual word you've used?"
You know what? I got to use my favorite word in the first sentence of the first book, in which no, I say it's the second sentence actually, because it is a recounting of a verbatim recounting of a telegram that kicks off the book and kicks off the inciting incident, which happened prior to this. And the sentence goes like this, or the telegram goes like this: Uncle Seb dead, defenestrated by unseen hand, come at once, fiddles. Which sounds a bit like a haiku, but I got to use the word defenestrated. But there are a couple of others. Frog skins, spondulix are two words that were quite common back in the 20s for money. I'm very fond of those. Cozenings. Why did I wind up come across this word? I cannot remember. I was looking up. I was looking up the word thieves. Thieves can't, because I wanted to know some thieves can't. And thieves can't it's not Cockney rhyming slang, but Cockney rhyming slang is a thieves can't. It's a way for thieves to communicate with each other in a manner that the police won't understand. And but what I loved about the page that I found describing thieves can't was the description of I cannot remember who wrote it. It was back in 1700s. Somebody was describing thieves can't and how it could be useful for the police to it, or at least for the authorities to understand it. And he said that the underclass uses it to hide their swindles, thievery, and cozenings. And I thought the word cozenings was delightful, but it obviously means underhanded work. So the short answer is defenestrated.
And Donna also said, "Very impressive to remember the opening of your first book when you're on book 9."
Yeah, the book 10, because Hardy Hall is the first book in a new series, and the Mystery of Malice Aboard RMS Ballast was number 8.
So, do you ever get? Obviously, you've got to do a lot of research to set them back when you have. Do you ever get called out on getting like a historical fact wrong, slipping an anachronism?
Among the other delightful aspects of self-publishing is that you can make corrections. And you probably shouldn't, but in the old days when they would do giant print runs and so on, if you made a mistake, that was it. You lived with it until they'd sold out all of them. And even then, the amount of print setup with an offset press to change one single stupid mistake you've made probably wasn't worth it. So if you're going to make a mistake, better make a lot of mistakes. But now I've been able to go back and correct them. I'm embarrassed about them, but on the other hand, I'm very, very grateful for them as well. With the very first book, I did. I referred to Anthony Bougele's favorite tipple as whiskey soda, and I cannot remember the exact circumstances, but Vickers is Auntie's valet. He was wearing spats indoors, and Auntie. Oh right, and I referred to a pavement as a sidewalk. And that was all in the first book, and the pavement probably came up more than once. And somebody called me out in a review, and it was, I mean, he was wrong, because he said only an American could make these mistakes, and I'm not American, so clearly he was wrong. But no, he was absolutely right. And as I say, I'm grateful I'm able to fix them. They're obviously still out there somewhere, and I own them. I own up to them, and I work a lot harder now. to make certain I get those things right. I genuinely thought that I was unlikely to make those mistakes because I read so much from that era of British writing from that era. But it's obviously going to seep in. But now I am appreciably more careful. I do a tremendous amount of research. On the other hand, I'm also not that hard on myself. I try to not make mistakes like that because they're clangers. They're absolutely painful to come across, and now they're painful to my ear as well. Having said that, I've been called out on a couple of others, and I've looked at it and I thought I'm not going to change that. An example that I can think of off the top of my head, there are no shortage, but I use the word access as a verb, and a very nice chap wrote to me privately to say access wasn't a verb until the 1960s when it was employed in computer technology. Until then, access was a noun. You could access a room, you could have access to a room, but you could not access a room. And I thought, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm going to say that Anti invented the word earlier than its first used for computers. I got a very poor review a little while ago, a very poor rating a little while ago. I did not regard the review as poor. As a matter of fact, I was very grateful that she had taken the trouble to write why she was giving me 1 star. And it's because I had used the word cemetery as though it was a synonym for graveyard. And I confess, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the hell that must have meant, because they are synonyms, aren't they? And to this day, I don't know why she was bothered by that, but she could not finish my book because I had used a synonym, graveyard.
I think a graveyard's the kind of thing you would find in a church where traditional burials are, and a cemetery is the kind of thing you would find at crematorium.
To be fair, that is exactly what she said.
Bury ashes and
used church graveyard. And again, to be fair, it is right. I'm writing in the first person. So yes, well, I definitely should have got that right. No question about it. On the other hand, Anti Bougeli might have got it wrong. I think the average person would have got it wrong. So I'm not going to fix that one. I'm not going to feel badly about that one.
I'm guessing at that time, though, you'd probably be more likely to still go for the traditional burial.
Yes.
I think when crematoriums became more of a thing in the UK, but I don't.
Indeed, the cemetery in question was a church graveyard. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So if a church graveyard is not a cemetery, then I did make a mistake. There's no question about it. Or did Auntie make a mistake? As it's in the first person. A little while ago, just a couple of days ago, a woman pointed out the very, very first book. The very first book, very first paragraph of the first book is a telegraph, and the date is on the telegraph, July 28th, 1928. And then not 2 days later, Auntie is walking in the Sussex countryside, and he's admiring the perfume of the blossoms in July. Yeah, I got that wrong too. I confess I got that wrong. And my wife asked me, "Are you going to fix it?" And I said, "No, I think I'll just imagine that Auntie thought he smelled some blossoms, but he didn't really."
I mean, I guess it's fiction. You can kind of make up some of it. You can sort of say you're.
Well, exactly. I think that you need to find some sort of frontier after which, you confess to a mistake, you own a mistake, and you either fix the mistake or you live with it, or you say it's not enough of an error to actually warrant calling it a mistake at all. And there are some people, I think, some readers who like historical fiction. They're absolute sticklers for it, and they like historical fiction being written by actual historians. I'm not an historian, and so those people are probably never going to like my books anyway, and they're going to continue to enjoy reading historical fiction. And good, that's why they have menus in restaurants. People like different things.
I like historical fiction. I quite like it when it showcases real people from the era as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're characters in it. Do you do that in yours? I've only read the first one so far, so
I don't, and I won't. They are referenced, obviously. Stanley Baldwin is Prime Minister, and George is the King, and so on. But no, I don't want to bring in real people, unless, of course, I'm engaged by the Woodhouse estate or something like that to do something of that nature. But no, every character in the book has they're reasonably two-dimensional, they're reasonably eccentric, but they're all a little bit silly. And so I don't want to cast aspersions on real humans if I can avoid it.
I think all humans are a bit silly though.
They are a bit silly, absolutely. It's much easier to decide just how silly they are and allow them to be as silly as you like if they're completely fictional characters. I'm very tempted, by the way, and if you know what, I'd like to change my answer if I may. Yes, I would consider doing that, just not in any of these current series.
Okay. Yeah, I think you have to be careful with how you do it, but I've read somewhere it's done really well. And there's actual like sort of genuine people and genuine events, and it's quite, I think that's quite an interesting sort of way to go with historical fiction.
Yeah, and indeed, you asked about research. I found some pretty entertaining things while researching. And sometimes it's made me think, I think I would like to write about this guy. I think this person would make a genuinely interesting character, but I'm awfully busy right now already.
What's the like most interesting or weird thing you've discovered then while researching?
One of the most delightful things I found, I don't know if it was weird as much, but one of the most delightful things I found was this. I was research is this delightful rabbit warren of epiphanies, and by which I mean you start researching a thing that's unrelated to where you wind up, and you wind up going down all these different rabbit holes. And I was one of my favorite resources for this sort of thing is Hansard. And I was reading Hansard from 1910, 1911, something like that, when Churchill was Home Secretary. Somebody, obviously an opposing member, was asking the honourable member about another member of the Conservative Party who wasn't present that day because the rumor was that he had been arrested. And Churchill answered, yes, indeed, he has been arrested, but he was arrested unjustly because he was the victim of a cruel prank. And so, and that's all. That's as far as I got. So I had to find out who the member of parliament was, and I found out what the cruel prank was. He had been walking down the street with a known prankster at the time, Horace de Vere Cole or something like that. They were mates. And he's walking down a street in London, and Horace says to this MP, he says, "Hey MP, I'll bet you I can beat you in a foot race from here to, let's say, the Westminster Bridge." I'm obviously making that part up, but the rest is true. And he says, "Okay," and they get ready and they're off. But Horace doesn't run. The MP is running as fast as he can, and Horace is standing back and he says, "Stop, police, he's got my watch." And a constable stops the MP. And indeed, Horace had the presence of mind to also drop his watch into the MP's pocket. He was arrested and charged, and this delightful prank resulted in questions being asked in Parliament.
That's really cool.
You want to hear the other favorite?
Go on.
All right. In the case of the Horace prank on the MP, I was probably researching voles or something. I have no idea why. In this case, I remember what I was researching. I was researching laws about pawnbrokers at the time because I want to know how pawnbrokers were regulated, if they were regulated at all. I cannot remember why I wanted to know that. Probably had something to do with what happens when you pawn something abstract, like the way a puppy makes you feel when he cocks his head. And I came across this debate about the pawnbrokers law in 1927-ish. And the two members were debating it back and forth. And one member says to the other member, you cry real tears here today, and you give no thought whatsoever to the people who've been killed from dancing to Charleston. And I've since looked into it and found out who the actual MP was. And I wish I could remember it now, because it would add to the humor if I could remember who this honorable member was who actually stood up and said that dancing to Charleston is fatal. But then it comes to pass, it's true. Not a year previously, and once again, I can't remember exact dates, 26, 27. Not a year previously, apparently 28 people died in Boston when a floor gave way while they were dancing to Charleston. I know that's obviously tragic, but it's almost 100 years ago now, so we can laugh about it. But the fact that I was researching something about the regulation of pawnbrokers and we came across an actual question being asked in Parliament about the fatality statistics of dancing the Charleston, I find absolutely delightful.
I think there's a lot of delightful stuff like that. Although you do have to read the things written about what's discussed in Parliament. Our school got a mention in Hansard.
Oh, yes? Well, in a good way or a bad way?
In a good, kind of nerdy way.
Okay.
We got visited by an MP, and then he was talking about coming to school, and that one of the questions he got asked was, what was the meaning of life?
That's fantastic. How old was the kid?
Well, it was the older kid, so it'd been like 16.
Was
And the answer is obviously 42.
It was obviously 42, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Did he say 42?
Yeah.
Okay, I full respect to both of those people. The kid who asked the question and the MP who I'd like to think without a beat said 42.
Oh, he did, yeah. Yeah, got to. It's got to be Douglas Adams all the way, hasn't it?
Of course.
So we've covered that. Tell us about your new series. You said in your introduction. When does it come out? The first book in it?
It has just come out, as a matter of fact.
Hardy Hall is. You need to tell us about it.
I beg your pardon?
If it's come out, you definitely need to tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's out now. Hardy Hall features Teddy Quillfeather, and she is, as I mentioned, Auntie's fast living, fast thinking, fast drinking cousin. And she appeared first in Mystery and Malice Aboard RMS Ballast. She has her own series now. As a reward for helping Auntie solve a double murder at sea in Mystery and Malice Aboard RMS Ballast, she gets her own series. And as a further reward, she doesn't have to deal with any locked room murder. And indeed, this is the public service announcement with respect to my new series. There's no murder in it. This is in something of a nerve-wracking departure from the genre. I'm writing cozy mysteries without murder. Teddy Quillfeather deals with crooks and swindles and forgeries and loaded dice and counterfeit ice and no murder. And as the locked room murder is to Auntie Beaujolais, the multi-layered conspiracy is to Teddy Quillfeather. And in the very first book, she is sent to Hardy Hall in the countryside with strict instructions from her mother that she must select from one of the 3 bachelors who are available this weekend, approximately 1 husband before the weekend is over. Happily for Teddy, because matrimony doesn't really correspond to her immediate goals. Happily for Teddy Quillfeather, there is the distraction of an impossible theft. Lady Turville's incredibly valuable, incredibly mysterious, and incredibly ugly necklace has been stolen from Lord Turville's safe, even though only he knew the combination. Teddy is charged with recovering the necklace discreetly, because you don't go around a country house populated for the weekend with aristocrats and the wealthy and knights of the realm and young men who've never had to pick up a sock in their lives and accuse them of being thieves. So she has to try to get it back discreetly. And this works very well for Teddy because as Auntie Beaujolais is a deductive sleuth, Teddy is a gifted liar and thief and plotter, conspiracist. And in her books, of all the capers that take place, she's very likely to have been responsible for at least 2 of them. And so she sets about not just to find out who's got the necklace, but to steal it back. She soon discovers, though, there's a lot more going on this weekend than the theft of an ugly necklace. There's also the theft of a previous necklace several months prior. There's industrial espionage going on. There's a curse, and there's a secret romance, and there's a penguin. And Teddy has only the rest of the weekend to solve the problem of the romance, to find the necklace, get the necklace back, figure out the real secret behind the industrial espionage and solve that problem. And she has to somehow do it all while putting off 3 potential bachelors and saving her family fortune and bringing it all to a happy ending at the end. Whether or not she does, I'm afraid I can't let you know that because that would be a spoiler.
It's true. Laura says the new series sounds a bit Tommy and Tuppence, but better.
It's very Tommy and Tuppence. There's murder in Tommy and Tuppence, of course, and indeed there is a sidekick in Teddy's Mysteries. The sidekick, I think, is good. I'm not going to say who it is. It's a funny Easter egg for those who have read the Anti Bouchelet series. It's absolutely not necessary. All the books are standalone, but there are some fun things that happen in one book that are fun in a different way if you've read the other books. So the jokes land differently if you've read some of the other books, and it makes it slightly more Tommy and Tuppence than I'm letting on now. Thank you for that observation, by the way. That is a very, very flattering comparison.
Is it kind of hard to come up, because obviously while you're doing your research and you're coming up with cool, like, inventive names, you've also got to make them fit into the time, because obviously there's certain names that are a bit more trendy than the trendy.
Yeah, as it happens, I don't actually care for modern names all that terribly much, so I don't have that much difficulty with it. The real problem, I think, is avoiding reusing names. So I started a couple of books ago. I started a census. I maintain a full census document with birth dates, where they live, and so on and so forth. So I don't reuse too many names. They do get reused sometimes. But now what I tend to do is especially if I need a character for an anecdote, and he's not actually going to be present, but I want to tell a funny story about him, then I'll go back to the census and I'll find Lord Doncaster or Lord Doncaster's son, and I'll reuse him in the anecdote, even though he appeared in another anecdote elsewhere. The family names, this is a trade secret I'm about to give away. The family names work like this. When I need a family name, I decide where the background of the character is. And I look on a map, roughly where the character would be from. And I look at all the towns until I find a name that not necessarily will service as a last name, but inspires a last name. And then as for the first names, I usually start with the nickname. So Fiddles was named long before I even knew there was I've forgotten his name. I've forgotten his real name. Fairfax. Before I even knew that Fairfax was a man's first name, I named it Fiddles. This is true of Logger, Logger Tenpenny, Spins Pearly. I don't know Spins Pearly first name, but Spins Pearly has motion sickness, and I thought Spins Pearly. You obviously have to call him Spins Pearly.
Donna said, "Do you also keep track of all the jokes, etc.?" She feels like her head will explode just listening.
I have to also keep track of all the jokes. I think it was in over 70. I read a lot of Woodhouse and about Woodhouse as well. But I think he said, yeah, of course I start reusing jokes. I said, I've written 93 books and I'm 90 years old. I'm going to start reusing some jokes. I don't want to do that. He's got more of an excuse because he lived in the days of paper and pen. And I don't. I can keep track of them a little bit better, and I can even do searches in my documents to make certain I haven't reused certain jokes. But yeah, this is what I hope though will happen when people get to a joke. I like to think that part of the delivery of the jokes, part of the timing of the jokes, is that they're not jokes. There's not a setup and a punchline. They're very often just something that happens in the rhythm of the speech and happens to be funny, and then we move on. And so that can be kind of stressful when you're reading it, thinking, I want to pay attention to this joke and savor it for a moment, but don't. I keep going, and I'd like to think that the joke becomes sort of a fog of humor, and above all, that means that when you read the book a second time, you still get something out of it, maybe even a third time as well. So please don't stress about keeping track of all the jokes. I can't.
Will I try and remember the question I was going to ask you next, because it's gone out of my head? Tell us what you've read this year and really enjoyed.
I read a lot of dead authors, if I'm honest with you. I have not read a lot of my contemporaries, and I feel badly about that because it's just not the kind of thing that a current author should say. But in terms of the last book I finished reading was Oliver Twist. And actually, but as for books I've read and enjoyed, that wasn't among them. I like Oliver Twist fine. I like Dickens. I always have a Dickens that I'm reading, but the last Dickens that I enjoyed was Great Expectations. I always have an Agatha Christie and a Woodhouse in rotation. The last Christie that I read was Seven Dials, and I read it because it's funny. I don't. She doesn't usually get a lot of credit for comedy, but it's especially the first half of this book is genuinely hilarious. And I didn't. I maybe I'm being naive when I say this, but I didn't credit her with that, or didn't remember. But I enjoyed that book a lot, even though the plot, I'm sure she wouldn't regard it as among her best. It's not really a mystery. It turns out to be a spy tale at the end. But I'm not gonna ruin that for you. Somebody asked me on Goodreads a little while ago who I thought was the funniest writer, who wasn't the funniest mystery writer, who wasn't deliberately funny, and I said Dorothy L. Sayers, specifically Murder Must Advertise, which is not a book I've read recently and enjoyed, but she said back, I think that Smallbones Deceased by Michael Gilbert is and that's what I'm currently reading, and it is a pretty good book. It's pretty funny. As for the last living author that I read is probably Colson Whitehead. Oh, how recent is that? That's probably January. And I read Harlem Shuffle, I think it was. And it's not funny, obviously, but I like a lot of noir. I like Chandler. I like Himes. I like Hamilton and MacDonald, I mean to say, and Hammett. And Colson Whitehead is he's managed to migrate the entire firmament of noir into not a modern setting. It takes place over a decade in the 1670s, but into modern sensibilities, if you will. And above all, he's struck this chord that Raymond Chandler particularly, and maybe Chester Himes to even a greater degree, struck as well. And that is a rhythm of speech, not just these delightfully witty metaphors that you find in noir, but also a lyricism, a harmony. And I have a lot of respect for that. It's very important to me. I will spend an hour easily selecting the right word if the one I've currently have doesn't have the right number of syllables for the sentence, because harmony is extremely important to me. I have this metronome in my head that tells me exactly what the rhythm of a sentence should be. I may not get that right. It may not be to everybody's taste, but that's how it works for me. And Colson Whitehead seems to have the same metronome beat in his head that I have in mine. And the Woodhouse I'm reading right now is Money in the Bank, which is a Woodhouse I haven't read before, because I keep rereading the Jeeves and Wooster and the Blandings Castle series over and over again. I've never read Money in the Bank before. I'm enjoying it enormously. It's nice to find a Woodhouse that isn't exactly what I expect and still enjoy it. And even though I haven't read either of them recently, I should probably shout out to Karen Baumano and Benedict Brown. Benedict Brown particularly, because I mentioned these two because they're both very much in the same space as me. They're both very, very good. They're both very, very good plotters. They're not funny. I hope they're not intending to be funny, because they're not funny. They're in a different space. But I particularly want to mention Benedict Brown because he's got a new series called Quinn. Marius Quinn. And the reason I mentioned that is because I got a very nice review for the new book, Hardy Hall, in which somebody said, "Oh, great minds think alike." Teddy Quillfeather, just like Marius Quinn, also has a 1927 Red Invicta he calls Vicky. And I swear to Benedict, I did not read his book before giving Teddy Quillfeather a 1927 Red Invicta called Vicky. And that's where I am right now. Ask me again in a few days. When I finish the book I'm currently working on, I typically take a couple of days to read something just completely outside of what I'm working on. The last book I did, well, actually, was Great Expectations. It would be something along those lines for the next book.
It's very mean to yourself reading Dickens constantly. As someone who's quite creative in your stories and funny? Have you got any creative marketing things that you do to sell your books?
I really enjoy my newsletter very, very much. And I initially resisted doing a newsletter because I think, like an awful lot of other authors, you think that nobody wants to know what I'm doing with my time. They want to read their books. And so I didn't do a typical newsletter. I do a newsletter that is explicitly, for one thing, it's got an editorial policy that says I will not send out a newsletter unless I've got 2 exclusive pieces of news and 2 cartoons. So I'm doing cartoons now as well that are kind of based or at least to purchase from the stories. They feature Teddy and Auntie Bougela and Fiddles Canterfell and Inspector Wittersham, and they may indeed be retelling scenes of the books, but typically they're not. Typically they're standalone cartoons. Whether or not that's selling any books, I don't know. It's the business aspect of it is just, I just don't have a cynical bone in my body, and so I'm so bad at the measure and marketing of that aspect, of that side of things. But I do like doing these things. I like the cartoons, and people say nice things about people, so people receive them well. So the newsletter, and that really is about it. I'm extremely hesitant to do things like readers magnets and whatnot because, again, I think I just feel very cynical doing that kind of thing. But furthermore, I don't want to corrupt the canon, as it were. I don't want to give one group of people an exclusive story that other people can't have. That just seems like it's going to somehow split Auntie Bougela, and Auntie Bougela is already complex enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I was asking someone about that the other day, and I thought it's worth. You might have some interesting things.
Well, I think the cartoons are genuinely interesting, and I was doing them for a while and just putting them on Facebook. And I thought the only person profiting from this is Facebook. So I put occasionally some of them on Facebook, but I save them now I saved most of them for the newsletters. The newsletters are exclusive, so people who sign up for newsletters get cartoons and so on. And then 4 to 6 weeks later, the newsletter gets put into an archive on the website, so everybody can see them eventually. But the objective is to increase the number of people who subscribe to the newsletter. And this I don't think is a cynical thing, because it is an effort to in the easiest possible manner let people know what's going on. It takes a while to write a book, and I don't know necessarily when the next one's going to be published, but there is an awful lot of stuff going on. We've got the audiobooks going on as well. Now we've got a second series, and if people are interested in knowing where we are with those things, it makes sense for them to sign up to the newsletter, but not just to get, buy my book, it's discounted or whatever else. But no, here's a cartoon as well, and it's funny, and it took me a long time to draw, so please enjoy it.
Fair enough. Have you got any? I mean, I know you're sort of overseas, but have you got any author things planned that aren't with us? Got any interviews? Are you going to any crime festivals?
No, I would absolutely
like Harrogate or Scotland or somewhere.
I would dearly love to. Very often I'm a little bit timid about these things, and it's not because I'm timid. I don't think I come across as timid. I certainly hope I don't. It's because an awful lot of these events are not open to self-published authors, and that I know so many self-published authors, when they say that, they say it with a deep resentment. I don't at all. I fully understand that the sponsorships comes from the publishing companies and so on. But nevertheless, I do need to be careful with my resources. I don't make a lot of money as an author, and so I can't be popping all over the country just showing up hoping somebody will listen to me. So for the time being, no. I need to be invited. I can't just go. I'm not. You mentioned, by the way, compensating the authors who are at Leeds. I don't need to be compensated, but I do need to be asked. I'd like to know that I'm wanted, I suppose. So no, for the time being, I don't have any events planned. I was at the London Book Fair, just to have standing at the Alliance of Independent Authors booth, and not much came of that, but it was a hoot. I enjoyed myself enormously. I lost my voice. I talked so much. So I had a tremendously good time, but it's often very, very difficult for somebody like me who, who eschews the cynical side of business to really sell at events like that.
I think, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think some events are a bit more open than people think. So I've seen, like, Bloody Scotland, for instance. I mean, you wouldn't be able to enter their prize list because you're not Scottish or writing things set in Scotland, but they have had independent authors on their prize list.
Yeah, I actually know that, and indeed, I was a little bit tempted because the case of Kilcladdock is set in Scotland, and that was that was book number 5. That was book number 6 in the. Not that I think it counts, and I don't think it should count. They should have rules. The rules are guide rails, and we should respect them. That's why I'm able to say I write cozy mysteries, and people have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say I write cozy mysteries. So I respect that. So you know what? Advise me then, Carolyn. I'm not smart about these things.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of festivals out there, and there's quite a lot of little ones. Like Chilton Kills is quite good.
Yeah.
I've heard good things about Capital Crime. Bradford, right near me, has got a really good literature festival. It's quite open to a range of authors. So there's quite a lot of stuff around. Like there's probably more literature festivals than you can shake a stick at. Donna says she's got a please with lots and lots and lots of A's and S's and E's in. Come to one day.
Absolutely. I was joking about this with you prior to us going live, but I was actually quite serious about it when I said that this interview is an effort to for lack of a less cynical word, promote my name a little bit, to get my profile a little bit higher, so that I can go to these things and just have a reason to be there, just have standing. I mean, you can just go and be in the crowd. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I should do that. But I live in Paris, and so it's not cheap for me to go to these things. If I plan far enough ahead, it's fine. It's quite reasonable. It's actually, considering that once you're in England, that's when you really start paying for trains. It's not that much more expensive as long as I plan ahead to get to the UK. But I still do need to plan. And this is and that's what I'm doing. This interview hopefully will be a catalyst, or will predicate me toward maybe events or getting invited somewhere. I'll go anywhere. I'll go to the opening of a dog show.
Do you know, I learned the other day that there is a dog show called Good Wolf, and I genuinely thought it was made up, but it actually exists.
A dog show called Good Wolf?
Yeah.
Are you sure I didn't make that up? Because it sure sounds like something.
No, I genuinely thought it was made up. I absolutely thought someone had made it up. I thought it was a joke, because we have a joke about like dog things at our school, that if you teach a dog to dance, it'd be choreography. And I was like, someone made up Good Wolf, but it's actually a real thing. People really go to it. It does exist. That's just my new favorite discovery in the world. I'm like, I just love that exists.
That is, and it is it's a dog school?
No, it's a dog. Good Wolf. It's like a dog festival.
So okay.
Has a literary corner, so you've written books with
I'd be seeing if it didn't.
So there you go. You could write an inventive dog into your book and go to that.
There is a, and I don't do this, by the way, to pander in any way, shape, or form. I like animals a lot. And what's more is I like the shorthand you get when you put people and animals together as characters. Because how people respond to adversity, how people respond to the weather, how people respond to murder, and how people respond to animals are all great ways of judging the character, or rather, in the case of fiction, depicting the character. So I always have an animal in my books, and the one you've just read, there's a goat. The animal's role expands appreciably from the goat. The goat was there, as you've read the book, you know that the goat is quite a significant plot device. And the next one, there is a midget cow.
Cool.
But a dog, in number 3, there is a Scottish Terrier.
I do like it. I like meeting random animals. Got to cuddle a baby goat at school once. It was great. Like we had animals came in, and this woman just dumped like a baby goat on me, and I was like holding it. It was like I was like, this is the best day ever. Just all animals fab, aren't they? Like nice to meet. So you've got, what are you writing now then? So you've got a book just out. What are you working on currently?
I am writing. I would guess roughly 6,000 words away from the end of death reports to a health resort. Auntie Beaujolais has gone to Epping Forest, where there's a health resort hidden in the trees, to protect the family name, because his uncle, who is staying at this health resort, his uncle, who is an inveterate gambler, has gone to this health resort to try to break himself of this habit. And while there, the most hated man in the health resort is murdered. He is in fact the doctor who runs the health resort and forces the residents of the health resort to live clean, healthy lives. And so he's murdered, but he's murdered literally while up a tree. It's an impossible murder, and Auntie Beaujolais has to get there, not only figure out how to prove his uncle innocent, assuming his uncle is innocent. As we've seen from some of the other books, sometimes it is not who you suspect it is, or sometimes it's exactly who you suspect it is. But he also has to figure out how the murder was committed. But furthermore, there is, as is usual with Auntie Beaujolais mysteries, there is a third mystery that is impossible. That couldn't possibly happen, and yet it obviously did. And in this case, there is a basset hound who has an absolutely extraordinary sense of smell. Diogenes the basset hound, as a matter of fact, is how the Epping Forest Health Resort enforces its rule of no alcohol, no tobacco, no tea even, because they have this dog with an extraordinary sense of smell, who is also pivotal to the plot. And again, no spoilers.
Excellent. We don't want spoilers.
No, that should be done. I expect that's going to be ready for production, ready for release in July.
Wow, that's not far away. You ever attempted to write in another genre?
I've written in many genres. When I was a ghostwriter, as I mentioned, initially, in order to get any work as a ghostwriter, I put myself on one of those gig platforms to get any ghostwriting work that would come along. But of course, without any experience whatsoever, I wound up writing poems, because I have something of a knack for poetry. Not everybody does, so I was able to get that kind of work fairly quickly. Poems for kids, greeting cards, and that type of thing. And from there, I was able to slowly work my way up with contacts and so on and so forth. I wrote Victorian romances. I wrote westerns. I wrote young A thrillers. I wrote regular romances. And I love them all. Absolutely love them. I tend to try to inject a little bit of humor, or at least a comedic relief in each one of these. Sometimes it's not appropriate, obviously. But I tend to always want to put the humor in, and sometimes I have to hold myself back. But I always want to write comedy. But even if you're not writing comedy, the degree to which I am selective about the words that I use and so on, I think has helped a lot. And as I say, I'm not at liberty to say what these books are, because I've signed contracts saying I'm a ghostwriter, and I can never take credit for these books. But I'm not ashamed of any of them. Every once in a while, I take them out and think, this is all right. I was a good little Victorian romance, that is. And a lot of them were very much influenced by Dickens and so on, or modern romances as well. And as I mentioned, I wrote an awful lot of outlines as well. Science fiction, westerns once again, Victorian romances once again, Amish romance. I wrote a tremendous number of outlines for authors who apparently couldn't write their own. So yes, I've written an awful lot of other genres. I would kind of like to. I have a couple of books sitting in the back of my mind that I have what I think is quite a clever time travel story that I would like to tell, but I just don't have time to do it. I had written an entire outline for a book which was going to be which was intended for this year. So it's not going to happen now, but it's going to be on the 50th anniversary of the hijacking by what's his name, Hooker, I think his name was, who hijacked Delta Airlines and jumped with a parachute on and $200,000 in cash. And they found some of the money in the Nevada wilderness. And he's assumed to be dead, but we've never found the body. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if my alternate theory was a novel, and it was going to be a 2-timeline novel where we followed what actually happened on this hijacking, and also 2 criminals on the run in a modern time, and their paths slowly come together for an absolutely shocking end. However, the book, I just don't have time to write the book. So I would love to, but I'm having such a great time writing Auntie Bougela and Teddy Quillfeather. And I think this is the best contribution I can make to the world. A comedy and this happy, delightful proto-England where you can go like St. Mary's Mead and Blandings Castle and be among friends and have unpredictable things happen, but still it's never dangerous, and it's always friendly, and it's always funny, and there's normalization of day drinking, and then you can have a great time until it's time to go back to the real world, but you can know that you close the book and put them in stasis until you can open the book again. That's the contribution I want to make to the world. Christmas before last, I got an email from a woman who told me that, this is just after Christmas, January 1st of 2022, that her mother had died over Christmas, and that I got her through it. And I'm thinking, as a software architect, that almost never happened. And so that I was already pretty firmly on this journey, but if anything could set me absolutely concretely certain that this is what I should be doing, that was it.
Right, you have 30 seconds to tell people what they're going to go away and buy after watching this chat.
If you haven't read The Case of the Canterville Codicil, it is the first book in the Auntie Bougela series. I love it. And if you haven't read it, by all means, get it. All the books are standalone, so just jump into the series anytime you like. It's like Poirot. You don't have to have read the Mysterious Affair of Styles in order to read Poirot's Christmas, for example. The new series, however, is Teddy Quillfeather, Hardy Hall at Hardy Hall. It is a cozy mystery without murder. It is delightfully witty, and I love it too. And I'm hoping that if enough people appreciate it in the same way that they appreciate Auntie Bougela, that we'll have a whole new series. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
And then thanks for joining us.